Hi, it's Kathy here from Bishopstone Yarns. I'd like to welcome you all here to my little corner of my studio, and I'll just introduce myself to those people who haven't seen my podcast before. My name's Kathy and I am Bishopstone Yarns, and this is a podcast mainly about knitting, a little bit of spinning, weaving, and I guess a few other kind of fibre related crafts. And today we're going to go through I've got a finished project, I've got a WIP, and we're going to talk about an old jumper that I had knitted a long time ago and trying to decide what to do with that jumper now. So you can find me as Bishopstone Yarns on Instagram. You can find me as Bishopstone Yarns on Facebook, and on Ravelry you can find me as Bishopstone. And of course you can find me here now as Bishopstone Yarns on YouTube. So I think for those people who are returning viewers, welcome, hello, nice to see you again. And for those new people, hi, it's really nice to meet you. I'm really happy that you'd like to spend some time here with me in this little corner of my studio. Now, as I was saying in a previous episode, we moved after 22 years in one place. We have moved to another house, and this is my new studio, which is still in the process of being tidied up, worked out, trying to work out where everything's going to go and get everything to fit in. So yeah, hopefully, this will help me kind of like tidy up my room, get the studio up and running, and then later on I can give you a bit of a tour of my little studio space as well. So I think I might start with this one here behind me. For those who have been here before, you would know that I had some cotton from my stash, and it had been in my stash for a very long time. I think actually it had even come from my mother, and so it had been sitting around for such a long time, taking me a long time to decide what to do with it. I kept getting it out, putting it away, and then I decided that I would knit this one, which is Hay Teach. And I thought for a nice summery, lacy top. I live in Tasmania, which is the little island off the south of Australia, and so we're just at the end of summer at the moment, and I thought this would be a nice little kind of cardigan for summer. I was going to put it on today, but the weather today is not very nice. It's still warm, but it's very overcast, and we have some really, really light misty rain, which is really good for the garden, because where we live we're all on tank water, and so it's always nice to get some extra rain for the garden, which I'm sure it's kind of crying out for at the moment. But it meant that I suddenly couldn't put my cardigan on, otherwise it would have been sitting here freezing. And so I've just put back on my cedar point jumper, which seems to be my go-to jumper for just about anything and everything. It's kind of like probably the jumper that you just kind of grab to put on. And so this one was a design that came from Espace Tricot, which is a Canadian shop, and they have a fantastic podcast as well. You should go and check them out. Yes, so getting back to the Hay Teach, So I'm really happy with the pattern. I'm happy with the lace and how that all turned out. I'm still a little undecided about the colour. It's not usually the kind of colour that I would normally wear. I'd probably usually go for something a little bit brighter or a little bit, I don't know. But it is a really good kind of summery light cardigan. And then hopefully the weather here will change back to a nice warm, we'll get a few more warm days and I'll be able to wear it, and then I'll get some photos and yeah, tell you what I think. Now, the only concern I found when I was knitting with this yarn, which is a cotton, was I did find that, and I don't know if this is just the cotton, the yarn itself, or because of the age of it, it was quite easy to break, as you can see. So usually cotton is quite hard to snap. It's very loosely plied. I'll show you here. So it is quite loosely plied. It'll be interesting to see how it wears, whether or not it has a tendency to break, or if I catch it on anything, whether or not it's going to be likely to snap a lot easier than I was expecting. I was expecting quite a robust type of yarn. It's still very, very soft, I guess, because it's kind of very lightly plied. But it'll be interesting to see how it goes. It might wear well, or I might find that it's just a little bit too soft and breaks too easily. But apart from that, I'm quite happy. The Hey Teach, I think, has been around, the pattern itself has been around, I think, since 2008. It's been on my queue for a very long time. So at least I've got around to knitting it. I'd be quite happy to knit another one, maybe in a wool, in a light kind of wool. But yeah, the pattern itself I was quite happy with. I like the way it is. It fits and it looks. We'll just see how this one goes. It's all you can do, isn't it, when you make something? And yeah, you always, after all the time that you spent knitting something, you always kind of hope that you're going to just fall so much in love with it as soon as you finish. This one, it might be a slow burn. I might fall in love with it more when the weather's warmer and I start wearing it, as opposed to having it just finished and sitting around. But I do still need to have to put a button on it. This always seems to be one of my problems. I kind of finish a garment and then spend a long time trying to work out, I've got to put a button on it. What kind of buttons will I put on it? For something that shouldn't be such a huge thought process, I seem to spend a long time thinking about buttons and working out what type of button, what colour. Maybe with these ones I should just... I've got some clear buttons actually in my stash, so maybe I should have a look at those. Maybe some clear ones I could put on there. But I think there's only 3 buttons in there, so it's not as if I have to kind of, look for a huge number of buttons. Yeah. Anyway, I will let you know how it goes with the Hey Teach. Now, the other thing that I have been working on, which I think those people who have seen my other episodes, I've been working on this one, the Magnolia Bloom by Camilla Vlad. And so I've seen a lot of people have made this. I think quite a lot of people have made this one. So I had some alpaca silk and wool yarn that was also in my stash, and so I have, this is how far I have got so far. I actually, the first time I did the neck, I actually ripped it back because I thought it was going to be too tight around my neck. I don't really like this is still going to be close, but the other one was a lot closer and I thought it would just annoy me. So what I've done is actually gone up a size, but I haven't changed my needle size. between the neck and the body. So I think I'm on 6mm needles for this yarn, and so far, I mean, I'm heading towards the end of the pattern here. I really like the pattern. It's been quite nice to do. I have done nups before, which is like these little bubbles here. I've actually done an entire lace shawl that was covered in tiny little nups, and actually after I had done that, I had said I would never do nups again, because in the really fine lace weight yarn it would have just slowed the knitting down quite a lot. These ones aren't quite so slow, but I do find that there are a few, depending on the stitches before and after it, there are a few that seem to pop through to the other side. So I've been trying to make sure that when I knit, go back over the next row, I knit quite tightly at the top of the nups to make sure that there is less room for them to kind of tend to kind of pop back to the other side. Because I don't really, I mean, they're all supposed to be on this side as design, but yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to continuing on knitting with this. I've really liked it. It's so soft. It's one of those yarns that it's just going to be lovely to wear up around, you know, next to your skin. And yeah, I think the next thing is, once I've done a few more rows, I'll get another needle, pop it on, half the stitches onto it, and then try it on for size, because as you can see at the moment, I can't try it on around my shoulders to see how it's going size wise, but hopefully it'll fit really well. I won't have to rip it back and start again. But yeah, no, I'm really enjoying this knit. I think I mean, it would be nice. The pattern kind of calls for I think one mohair and one what does it call for one? No, maybe I should stop there, because maybe I can't remember actually what the suggested yarn is for it. So, but yeah, no, I'm really happy with this. This yarn is a little bit does have a little bit of halo. There are not necessarily guard hairs, but there are a few floating hairs around. I have noticed as I've been knitting that there have been a little bit of rogue hairs that have fallen off and sitting on my jeans when I've finished knitting. But it's not excessive. It's not too excessive, as in like for mohair, where it you know, you can end up with it everywhere. So I think yeah, no, very happy with it so far. We'll see how it goes in the future. So that is the the Magnolia Blue by Camilla Vad. And the other thing I have been working on is I've been watching the Woolly Thistle podcast, and at the moment they've got a Fair Isle or a colourwork knit along going on. So I have been doing that, and I've just finished their bonnet. So when you joined up for the knit along, you got the Balvonie bonnet pattern for free, and so I decided to knit this one, and of course I jumped into my hand spun yarns. So the pattern calls for 4-ply, which is a nice thin yarn. So I had a look through my stash. I did have, here's some of my hand spun. See if I can get it to focus. Maybe it's not going to focus. Anyway, and so this this one started off with it's a graduated pink and light pink and then darker pink, and then on the outside of this yarn there was a much more of a purples and blues and kind of reddy pink kind of colours. So that's one of the colours I was using, and the other one, the contrast colour, was this green, which is also some of my hand spun. Which is slightly thicker, but not too much so that I kind of didn't think it would make too much of a difference. So here it is, the finished bonnet. I haven't blocked this yet. I've only just kind of finished it. I'm really, really happy with it, and you can see here that was the start of this ball. Here was had all of these the really nice purples and the reds and the pinks, and then it went into the lighter pinks as we went through. The graduated or the variegated yarns, I was hoping that they would pick up the pattern a bit better than they did. As you can see in here, I didn't take into account that part of this ball did have some of the colourway was a greeny colour, which was very similar to the contrast colour. I didn't realise that when I started using the yarn. So in a few places here, it's very hard to see the difference between the pattern and the main colour. But it's only been in a few rows. Would have been okay if it had fallen, if those greeny colours had fallen somewhere down here or somewhere else. But I'm still really, really happy with it. I really like this hat. And actually the interesting thing was I had been looking for a pattern and just starting to think, as the weather is starting to get a little bit cooler here, I really need a nice warm hat to wear when I take my dog out walking, and we live quite close to the beach, and so it gets kind of a bit cool down at the beach. There's quite a lot of sea breeze, and so this knit along came at exactly the right time for me, and so yeah, it was so much fun. It was so much fun that actually the knit along's still going until March, I think the middle of March. I'm actually thinking about either knitting another one of the Balvonie bonnets, or thinking about doing a pair of mitts, like just fingerless mitts in colourwork in my hand spun. So I'll have a think about that, and I'll let you know in the next episode what if I've found a pattern or decided what I've decided to do. Now the other thing I was going to talk about, which I briefly mentioned last time, is I was going to talk about this jumper here. Now this jumper was knitted, I would say, close to 30 years ago, and that in itself sounds quite quite scary, doesn't it? 30 years ago. I was in my early 20s, and I had just finished uni, and a friend of mine, Lynn, and I went travelling around Europe together. I went away for 11 months and travelled around Europe. I had lived in Denmark for a year when I was 18, and so I went back to visit the family I stayed with. My friend had never been to Europe before, so we travelled around and had a great time backpacking and hitchhiking, doing all those things that only you only do once when you're young, don't you? Anyway, so at one point during our trip, my friend and I kind of ended up in separate places, and I was we were both in Scotland, but we headed up to a little town kind of way up north on the west coast, and I ended up in a little town called Ullapool. Now, the story behind how I ended up in Ullapool is we were looking for somewhere to work for a couple of months, and there was a job going in a really remote, I guess you would say, a little pub called the Aultguish Inn, which was literally kind of a lovely old pub kind of in the middle of nowhere, really. There weren't really houses nearby. There were farms and estates around. Anyway, we ended up working there only for a very short time, only for a few weeks. There was anyway, we ended up having to leave there. My friend got fired and we didn't get paid, and we ended up staying at one of the local estates there. When the ladies who owned the estates kind of let us go and stay at her place, which was lovely. And then I ended up getting a job in Ullapool, which is a little coastal fishing town, and working in the fish and chip shop. So ended up, came with accommodation. I ended up sharing a house with 8 other girls who I think most of them were working in the hotel up there. And of course it was summertime, so it was a high tourist time. Anyway, while I was there, and Ullapool is where the ferry goes across to the Isle of Lewis and Harris. And so at that time I was a knitter, but I didn't know a great deal about knitting and yarns, but I did know that I wanted to get some local yarn. So this is where this yarn came from. I didn't know anything about how much yarn to buy. I think I just bought a couple of skeins, or I can't even remember. I don't have the tags for this. I've looked at it and I'm pretty sure, it's Harris Tweed. I'm pretty sure it is. And but apart from that, I've got no idea where it came from, who made it. While looking into the yarns recently over there, I came across Alice Starrmore, of course, who's a Hebridean yarn maker. And I remember when I was travelling around on Lewis and Harris, I remember seeing all the sheep and being interested in it, but I don't remember seeing a lot of yarn for sale. I don't remember seeing a lot of discussion. There wasn't a lot of talk about yarns and wool at that time. And yeah, so this was very sentimental, and I had brought it back home with me. And then I found this pattern, which is more of like a harlequin. If you can see, it's got the triangles. It's a really nice pattern. I really like it. But of course I ran out of yarn, because when I bought it, I didn't know what I was going to buy, how much I was buying. And then it took me a while, and I found this contrasting yarn. And I finished that and finished part of the sleeves. So the sleeves have got different yarn here. If you can look at, I don't know if I can turn this around maybe, so I can show you the sleeves. The sleeves are huge, which is the style of the top. And I went looking for this pattern. I couldn't find the pattern. It was on a little pamphlet. The pattern was one of those ones that was on a pamphlet that came, I don't know, kind of like in one of those kind of kits where you used to get a whole heap, like, 5 or 6 weeks, like each month you'd get like 5 or 6 patterns, and they're all on little leaflets about this big. Anyway, so there is quite a bit of yarn here in the sleeves when you take into account. I put this on the other day for the first time in a long time, and I just thought, look, it was okay for when I was younger and thinner, but it's really just not the type of jumper that I would wear now. It doesn't look good on me. It's too short, it's quite cropped, the sleeves are far too big for my liking at the moment, and just the overall jumper just doesn't suit me, and I'm not going to wear it. But on the same side, I don't want to get rid of it because there's so much history to it. There's so much to this jumper that I'm so sentimental towards it. I mean, it is quite a, as we would say now, a rustic wool. It's not the softest. You'd have to wear, definitely wouldn't be wearing it next to your skin. Well, at least I wouldn't be. It's quite rough, but it's still such a lovely, hard-wearing, great jumper kind of yarn. And again, there are all these little bobbles. All this time I had spent making these bobbles. So I'm left thinking, do I just rip it back, frog it, and find something else to knit with it, something that I'm going to wear? I even thought about, will I weave it? Maybe I could weave it into something. But then I thought, it's not really the kind of yarn that I would be wanting to have like as a scarf or a shawl, not something that I'd be wanting to have right next to my skin. So I'm still sitting there thinking, I'm not really sure what to do. I think I might go back onto some of the websites and have a look and see if I can find some designs for Hebridean wool, much more rustic kind of Hebridean wool, and see what if I can get inspired by something. I mean, if anyone else has any ideas or pattern designs, please let me know.